Greetings one and all, and welcome to this flip through of the latest art journal. I posted not so long ago the book of the ancients, and it looks like these are coming together all at the same time. So this one's a lot longer, and this will be a sort of long form video, which I know doesn't suit everyone. People sometimes like to just be able to see something very quick and immediate. But I wanted this to be more of a meditative walk through the 37 odd spreads that I've produced over the last 20 months or so. At this point, just encourage you, if you like what you see, then do press the like button and subscribe to the channel. And if you feel so inclined, please share this with other friends, artists, collaborators. Okay, so what is this? This is actually a moleskin journal, the like of which I'm sure many of you have seen before. They come like this. And I used this originally as a street sketch book using watercolours, and found that the format was very useful in that it had this cotton-based watercolour paper in it, which lends itself well to absorbing, not so much absorbing watercolour, but taking the watercolour without buckling or wrinkling. And it's also very good for taking lots of glue, lots of layers, collage and so on, without it sort of falling apart. So the beauty of art journals, I've found personally, is that it allows you to experiment without risk. It's not like you're having to produce this magnificent work of art, a masterpiece that heightens the tension levels and feels like you've got to somehow perform and get it right and get it perfect. This is experimentation without risk, and it allows you to explore lots of different techniques. And within this, you'll see all sorts of things, from jelly prints to image transfers, use of acrylic paint, acrylic inks, stamps, water-based dyes and sprays, a whole host of things. And for me, it's just helped me have a focus to try out some of these things and see what works and what doesn't. The advantage of art journals, in addition to what I've just mentioned, is that, well, I think I've pretty much found in every spread that I've done, there's always been some sort of a happy surprise, something that I'd done that I applied the mark making tool or a bit of paint, and something just happened that I didn't intend, and it was really satisfying. And you get those moments throughout these sort of exercises. On top of all that, you end up producing something that's uniquely you. You know, no one will produce the art journal quite like you do. And I think it was Kurt Vonnegut, the late great author, who once was asked, what do you write about? What should I write about? And he said, well, just write about anything, because in the end, you'll be writing about yourself. And I think the same is true of art, that whatever you do, your own personality and your characteristics and your experience and what interests you will shine through. Uses? Well, I primarily did this for me. It's a personal record, almost like a diary. I suppose that's what the word journal means, that as you work through the days, weeks and months, you remember what you were doing when you did that particular spread, maybe what the life events were, what caused you to do it. And it marks a progress in time as such. You can use them as gifts. I've used them in the past as interactive features in exhibitions. I don't make them for sale, but it's nice to be able to put this and other books out, art journals, for people to just flip through. And it's something that's tactile, that gives them a sense of texture, as well as colours, shapes and contrasts. Let's move on to the cover, because obviously this is no longer the standard black moleskin cover. And I tried to put down something that, because once you start working with these things, you find that you get paint and glue and stuff everywhere. So apart from anything else, you want to cover that up. And I've used bits of fodder, as I call it, cast-offs or supposed cast-offs that I've produced in other art sessions and put aside, and I just covered the front and the back with it. So here we've got some acrylic inks and some dye sprays, a little bit of gesso. To put it on the spine, I've got some sort of icemic symbology here. On the back there's more of the same, and that's sort of followed through on the inner cover here, because we've got two pieces which you'll notice I've cut out with this sort of jagged edge. And by the way, to do that I use this tool here, which you may have seen before, but it's an alternative to a craft knife in that it has this sort of swiveling head. And I got the basic version, and because it swivels, it means you can draw any sort of line, irregular or otherwise, that you want without having to shift the surface, the paper, the medium round all the time, and it makes things very easy to cut out. Very satisfying. What else have we got here? This isn't actually part of the journal itself. I've covered this up. This is actually a nameplate, just in case I ever lose the thing, with my name, address, phone number and email on, and an incentive of a reward if it is returned. Hopefully that never happens, but for obvious reasons I covered this up for this flip through. So there we've got some fodder forming the inside cover. The title of the whole journal, I call these books of. So in this particular case, it was the Book of Days, and I'll talk about that in just a second, about how that came about. So let's work our way through this. It's going to take a little while, so you might want to dip in and out of it, get yourself a cup of tea or coffee, put your feet up, and hopefully you'll enjoy what you see. Okay, so here we've got what you might call the title page. I've been doing a lot of darker work just prior to doing this, and I wanted something that was a bit more sort of bright greens, floral themes. So we've got here a little bit of collage work, and this I cut out. This was actually not using that swivel-headed piece that I mentioned before. I did this old-fashioned with a craft knife, and it took ages. But I put that on top of these ferns, which are actually placed horizontal. And then we've got various jelly prints and some stamps on there, fairly grungy type things, which sort of forms the backdrop. Book of Days. I thought, when that's popped into my mind, oh, that's a great title, because the first one I did was called The Book of Ashes, which sort of had almost sort of morbid overtones to it. And I thought, I want something the flip side of that. And what about The Book of Days? So I thought, yeah, that sounds really unique and original. And then I was sitting down at my desk the other day, looked up, and I saw the book by Will Self, which is called The Book of Days, which I haven't actually read yet. Will Self is a very sort of intellectual type of author, and I haven't got round to flipping through that and spending some time in it. It's not the sort of book you really flip through, to be honest. Not Will Self. Very deep thinker. Anyway, it served to illustrate that sometimes we think we're being original, and very often we're just dredging up something from the past, something we might have seen or heard, and we reuse it, often in an unthinking way. But it is what it is, and I didn't want to change it. So please don't sue me, Will Self. Okay, and this is the next page, and it's a very busy double-page spread, this. I wanted to do something with an existing picture, so I got this picture of a model out of a catalogue, a clothing catalogue, and decided to experiment with various acrylic shades, skin tones and hair tones and so on. And then placed it in the midst of what I might call a profusion of colour. And the fact that the girl was smiling made me think of that phrase from the Led Zeppelin song Friends, which says, trade a smile with someone who's blue. And that seemed to sum up what this was about. I actually made a mistake here. I spelt who's wrong. I think I missed a letter out. But again, this is one of those little happy accidents. I made something out of it. And although it's not perfect, art isn't always perfection, is it? Moving on. This is another busy one. Includes a lot of fodder that I've used in the past, overlaid with various prints. I often do some mark making and then realise that I want to make it stand out more. So I make a lot of use of a white gel pen or sometimes a white Posca pen just to make certain shapes that I like stand out. This phrase, the myth and the magic, is a bit of a misquote. It's from a Neil Peart lyric from the song Natural Science. And it isn't actually the myth and the magic. I think it's the mist and the magic or something like that. But anyway, that's how it appeared and that's what it's become. Okay, yet another busy one, lots of different elements. I was really just trying to experiment with lots of different techniques on this one. So we've got some jelly prints up here, a bit of asemic writing in different directions. This is using cutouts. There's three different elements on this, and I wanted the idea of sort of it revealing parts underneath it. The phrase Vespers is a term for, I think, evensong in various church settings. And I've just been reading Helen MacDonald's book to do with the natural world. And I think it's called Vesper Flights, which refers to swifts, one of her essays. So I put a picture of a swift on there with some clouds beneath it because it seemed to have the vibe of that sort of scene of these birds, not so much taking off because they spend most of their life on the wing, but flying in the evening, catching their insects. This one has a lot of dyes and acrylic and rolling. It's worth mentioning here that often I'll keep this and other journals. I've got another one here which I've nearly finished as well. And I keep these next to my painting board when I'm doing things like image transfers, jelly printing, just producing things in general, mass producing, and I'll just roll off on these pages with some basic colours, never knowing what it's going to produce. And often they'll lie dormant for many weeks or possibly months until I come back to it and think to myself, well, what am I going to do with this? And in this case, I thought it needed a bit of collage on top. So this particular bit here is some tissue paper from a jelly printing session. And then I just embellished it with some more asemic writing and some use of a white gel pen. This one's entitled Something's Been Taken Away. It's a commercial print of some mathematical scientific formulae, which I then just put some ink marks on. And that was again on top of a background of acrylic and also water dyes. So it's a bit of everything here. And it's that idea that I only used a portion of it and there's a whole lot else on an A4 sheet. And the phrase just something's been taken away. It could be a crucial part of the equation, which probably makes this nonsense. Right, a lot of collage on this one. Windows of the Soul, as the title goes, refers to eyes. I think it's a biblical quote from somewhere. And I had an image transfer of, and I can't remember if it was a snake or a lizard or a salamander or even a frog, but it was on tissue paper. And because I got the background, by placing this on top, it seemed to sort of sink it into the background a bit and make it just a little bit more subtle. You also notice if you look closely, various stamps of eyes. There's one here, and you do have to look for them quite carefully. There's another one, if you can just make it out there. And there are various others around the place, plus the more obvious ones that I did with the white gel pen. So that had a kind of green-blue theme to it. The theme, not the theme, the song Money by Pink Floyd was going through my head when I was doing this one. And this isn't actually a £20 note. It's a serviette with the image of a £20 note on it. and it seemed to have a sort of bluish, black, greyish theme to it, and it was just built up in layers. It started off with the serviette, but then I included some vintage papers here. We've got some tissue paper work. This came from using the page as just a cast off, rolling over with the brayer, and there's 1 or 2 ink stamps on here with the number work and so on. Oh, and here's a bit of cloth, a sort of swatch or sample that I got. Lonely among the throng. There's a single ladybird here, but you often find ladybirds in large groups. And this was from a wildlife magazine, which had lots of other ladybirds around it. And it reminded me of a quote from Robin Williams, the comedian, where he said, sometimes you can be amongst this vast crowd of people and still feel like the loneliest person in the world. And it made me think, do little things like ladybirds or ladybugs, as you call them in the US, ever get lonely? Or do they always feel that they're part of something, part of a larger community? By the way, vicious carnivores, these things. They eat greenfly and whitefly and things like that. Very useful if you see them, put them on your roses and your plants, and they form a natural sort of biological control of pests. So lots of oranges and red themes around here, bordered with a tire mark ink tread stamp. Right, this one's a bit different. This is one of 2 forays into the world of AI, never to be repeated. I actually don't believe in the thing now because it scrapes off data and the work of original artists in a way that I don't actually approve of. So I actually did it as an experiment with Midjourney, just out of curiosity to see what this whole thing was about. And I wanted to come up with a bit of cover art, just as a work in something to put down for a book I was writing, a novel, which was called 17. It remains in draft form at the moment, something like 160,000 words. I'm not sure it will ever see the light of day, but it's a book about a guy whose body has been tattooed from head to toe, and it's a sort of crime stroke fantasy stroke science fiction type of book. But the thing I actually like most about it is where I put some heavy body black acrylic on both sides and scraped it away and produced some quite nice patterns. So never to see the light of day, except to you good folks. Changing the colour scheme a bit. Not too much to say about this one, except lots of layers, very busy again. I think I just acquired this acrylic ink, which is called Indian Yellow, and I absolutely love it. If anything, I overuse it just because I like the colour so much. Perhaps the one thing I can say is that often I arrange the elements on a spread like this and arrange them and then rearrange them and then take some bits away and put other bits in until I've got something that seems vaguely satisfying to me. So this one's a bit different. It took me quite a long time to do it. I started just with some wet on wet watercolour with some Payne's Grey and black ink, fairly monochrome, and just sort of spread it over the page, and then use some black fine tips to produce this sort of Zentangle type approach. I do like Zentangles. It's like detailed doodling, and it's very therapeutic because you don't have to think about it too much. And you can start with a pattern that someone has come up with, like this. This is a fairly common thing you see in Zentangle circles. But then add something to the outside or something else that is totally off the top of your head. So I was quite pleased with this one because there's quite a bit to look at and spend time on. And by the way, pretty much all of these spreads are present on my Instagram feed, which there's a link for in the description. So if you want to spend a bit longer just looking at each one in more detail, you can always go on there. This one's straightforward collage, and I seem to remember wanting to just produce something in almost linear lines. I'm not quite sure how many pieces are on here. There aren't many. This one's just a set of numbers from an accounts book, and there's a bit of gold collage here, probably tissue with some fodder underneath it. Oh, and there's an ink stamp there as well. And this didn't take long to do, which again is what I was saying right at the beginning of this video, that it's a very non-threatening way of working. If you're thinking, I haven't done any art today, I'd like to do something, but I don't really feel motivated to get all the paints out and make a big mess and have to sort of work to a design that I've done. And so I just went ahead, quickly slapped this stuff down, and happy accident. I was quite pleased with this. Very busy, this one. Yeah, won't say too much more about it other than it contains a lot of the elements I've mentioned before. I wasn't pleased with it at first because it seemed to be very mushy, lots of reds and yellows with nothing being really defined. And it wasn't until I started to add a bit of Posca pen work and icemic writing that it seemed to become something. Back to the watercolour. Again, a bit of wet on wet, splashes of colour. I wanted to put it in particular blobs this time, and tried out a bit of this pareidolia, if that's how you pronounce it, pareidolia technique, where you start to see shapes in sort of random blobs. And so you see, I saw a bit of a face in this one here, and it was almost like this distorted shark type visage here with a bit of Zentangle work as well. And this saw me sort of spacing things out a bit, not being quite as busy as some of the previous pieces had been. If I can get this next one open. Yeah. So I'm trying to remember which bit came first. I'm pretty sure it was the black marks. This was made using a roller technique. Got these cardboard rollers, and you know those cat fluff removers you get in places like IKEA and so on. If you take the roller bit and put on an old cylinder, doesn't have to be perfectly fitting. You then apply some sponge designs to the back. You cut it out and you stick it down, and you can just dip it in acrylic paint or ink and just roll it over, and immediately you get these great shapes. I think I went over it then with water-based dyes, sprays, and then linked it all together with this almost neurographic type of doodling. Another busy one. These are printouts of sort of commercial backgrounds that I'd bought. That's the bit that's taken away from that spread I mentioned before, by the way. I thought I'd reuse that bit. But this was using a kid's toy railway track. I just dipped it in, I think it was heavy body black acrylic ink, and just slapped that down to produce the underlying pattern. Sometimes I don't know if this is pages or not. That's just where the collage has come through. Okay, this one, probably the spread I'm least satisfied with in the book, simply that it came out just a little bit muddy, and work on it as I might, I couldn't retrieve it. Karuna is a meditation phrase, and I've forgotten what it means. You can Google it and perhaps tell me in the comments. That said, there are some bits in it that I quite like. I like this little block in the middle, a bit of Zentangling, this sort of mesh type stamp, ink stamp that I put on there. And also the symbology at the top and bottom I quite like. But as for an overall effect, it just leaves me wanting a little bit. This one taught me that gel pen doesn't work very well direct onto the cotton base of the Moleskine book. I just put thin layers of acrylic on this and thought I'd just do these drawings of characters. And I had to keep going over them again and again. It took well to where the acrylic paint was, but where it was fairly thin or non-existent, I found I had to just keep going over it. So lesson learned, like I say, it's experimentation. The phrase "pleased to meet you" is again another Rush lyric from the 2112 album, The Twilight Zone. It's when this giant boy approaches the singer and says, "I'm pleased to meet you." Would you be pleased to meet these characters? Not so sure. Okay, a dark theme, but also a theme of greens and blues. I just started working with this with the brayer, had some spare black paint, and fairly quickly got the idea I wanted to put some individual crosses, and I had a file somewhere that I'd taken from the internet of the various kinds of crosses that you can get. So there's crosses of St. George, Maltese cross, an upside down cross. Is that one from Black Sabbath? I don't know. And various other mixtures. And as I was doing it, again, another lyric, I said a lot of these things are sometimes prompted or see lyrics come through. This is from the Genesis song, Dance on a Volcano. And the midsection says, "Crosses are greener, crosses are blue." I'm not sure what Phil Collins meant or Tony Banks meant when he wrote that lyric, but it seemed apt in this particular case. A bit more spaced out on this. This was a background I took down digitally, and then I had an idea in my mind, the pattern that I wanted, with a strip and a fairly geometric circle on one side, and then these parts that, if you rotate it that way, are almost like they're hanging down. In fact, I think I did a lot of the drawing that way round and then tipped it up and decided, well, I didn't have any choice because that's the way the book is, but it seemed to look satisfying to me that it was this way round. And on this, it's almost like you've got a centre of an eye there with a multicoloured sort of rainbow approach to the iris part. This came as a result of an accident. I had some Prussian blue acrylic ink, which I really like as a colour, and I was working on something else and I spilt it and it went all over this page. And I thought, oh, disaster. Do I just glue them together and pretend it never happened? But what I did then was just got a colour shaper or a credit card or something and just spread the colour around and then use it as an opportunity to produce this collage bird. I'm not sure exactly what it is. It could be a jackdaw or something like that. But this took quite a bit of time. Again, I used that little craft knife rotating blade thing to cut out the various elements of the bird's plumage and then replaced it with fodder, jelly prints and so on to just give this effect of a bird at night on a log. The rest of it didn't take too long, but the bird itself took quite a bit of time. Another busy one. This one is actually newsprint of someone's hair, and it sort of led me to think of its fairly loose hair. And this is a phrase from Blake Butler. If you're ever interested in just reading through something that seems almost mindless and surreal, just look up Blake Butler's lists, and he just makes all of these lists, list after list of almost random phrases, but they are connected, and I find them quite inspirational. The colours here sort of reminded me of someone doing some exercise and the sweat dripping down in this sort of random surreal pattern, so I called it Loose Hair and Archived Sweat. Oh, and by the way, this one was done with alcohol inks from another piece of paper which I just stuck down. I haven't got into alcohol inks in a big way yet. Maybe something for the future. Another busy one, trying to make something out of nothing. This is another one where I like bits of it, not necessarily everything. It's a bit of a mishmash of colours. There's more reds on this side and sort of greens and golds on the other. But once again, there's little elements that come out of it. I quite like the idea of this house almost tipped on one side with the perspective a little bit off, and this one with a street view almost on the side as well. This effect here I use a lot, and I quite like, which is where you take a sponge, looks a bit like that. It's a blending sponge, that's quite a big one. That's probably the size I used for that. And you simply put on a surface, a tile, palette or whatever, two different colours usually, side by side, and you put this on top of it, just squish it about a bit, lift it off, apply it on here, and immediately you get this effect, which I love. This was a wooden stamp with the centre left free, which revealed what was underneath it. Here's an example of something which I'm not sure worked quite well. This is, I think, handmade paper dyed with water-based dye, and the water-based dye didn't take particularly well. But, you know, by doing a little bit of experimenting with it, I was able to blend it into the rest of the elements. That was quite simply my first experiment with Procreate. Produced a pattern, printed it off, stuck it down as a memento. Nothing too much more to say about that, except that this idea of cutting away sections with circles, sometimes squares and other shapes, is something that I've continued on with using Procreate. More of the old sponge blender type of effect here. It's pretty much all acrylic, this one. Palette knife, Chris's and crosses. Learning to use the palette knife better, using to sort of flatten it down and get this sort of smearing grungy effect as well. Lots of collage on this one. Start to use shapes here. I think this, yeah, this was acrylic with the palette knife again, trying to define some of the shapes and adding little ascenic bits. This one I started off again with watercolour, spreading it around. I think I used one of those bulbs that photographers' kits have, where you blow air to get little bits of fluff out of your lenses and so on. Yes, where was I? Photographer's bulb used to blow around the ink, which in this case, it wasn't ink actually, it was watercolour, I think. It might have been acrylic ink, not quite sure. And again, a bit of pareidolia. Seeing shapes. This has got a sort of nautical theme with some weird and wonderful beasts and shapes and boats and submarines and things. This one looks a bit whale-like. This one's almost like a prehistoric amphibian. And I just went over patterns with a pen and just built it up as the muse took me. A bit of a blue and white theme, that one there. Not too much to say about that one. Collage, acrylic ink, using the brayer. Getting near the end now, and I felt it was time to include some perhaps textile elements. So here's some more of the handmade paper. We've got some hessian here, dyed a little bit with coffee and tea stain, and a bit of string just randomly placed over the top of it there. Collage elements. This one is some paper that I think was put in the bottom of a sink to grab some coffee granules, and turned out to be an interesting pattern. And then there's also some dye, water-based dye sprays on there. I seem to remember this one took quite a long time to come about, because it started off with dye sprays that went directly onto the cotton paper, which on its own doesn't produce this pleasing effect if you were to leave it like that. You have to build it up in layers. So I added a lot of things here. Collage elements on tissue paper. This was actually stamped straight onto tissue paper and then transferred. And the beauty of tissue paper is that you can put it on and still see what's underneath. So you get this translucent effect. So another sort of yellow and orange theme there. Continuing with the yellow, orange and red theme, here's another example of that roller technique that I mentioned before. You can just put them on in different orders and different orientations and produce some interesting effects. Again, Indian yellow acrylic ink there, which I love so much. A lot more collage. This one here is actually the wrapper that comes round toilet paper. You probably know the brand name I'm talking about, but I save these. They're great to include for just isolated bits that just provide a bit of contrast. Quite a lot of golds and yellows on here, contrasting with black. And here I was getting towards the end and wanted to get something done fairly quickly. So I used a fair lot of postage stamps, plus some of my own home-produced fodder. Thought quite a bit carefully about the shapes and how they would arrange themselves around these postage stamps. And I tried to choose ones that were from different parts of the world. So that's obviously an Italian one there. There's one on here somewhere that I think says Ceylon on it. There it is. Of course, it's not Ceylon anymore, but I remember collecting these when I was really young, and that country was still called that. I think it's called Sri Lanka now. And this is one of the last I did, experimenting with some new stencils. I used the jelly plate to use some sort of pastel-y green colours as the underlying layer, and then use the stencils and ink stamps on top. And that's actually a bumblebee, which I sort of plunked in the middle because I like bumblebees. And then the last one, I'd had this stuck in here and I sort of discovered it at the end because these moleskins have a little pocket in there. I must have tucked it in and forgotten about it. So I thought, well, we'll make something of that. We'll make it like, I don't know, what would you call it, a vignette. Put some acrylic inks down, a little bit of mark making, went round it with some ink, made some interesting shapes. It was originally that way up, but I thought if I turned it that way up, it looks almost like this sci-fi type of jellyfish affair. So there it is. That's the Book of Days. In conclusion then, I'd like to encourage you to make your own art journal. If you find the idea of dabbling in abstract art a bit frightening in terms of, what do I do? What techniques do I use? What am I supposed to use to inspire me? How do I compose things? With this, as I say, very much the thrust of it is that you're free. You're free to experiment. There's no risk. You don't even have to show it to anyone. It can be just for you. It allows you to use a variety of techniques. It's a unique record of you, and it's very tactile. You can run your hands over some of these and feel the textures. Some are smooth, some are rough, some are wrinkled. And it's a different sort of experience. So I'd be interested to know whether there are particular spreads that you liked. If so, put them down in the comments. And do share links with your own art journals if you've made these already. I'd be very interested to see what you have produced. I will be producing more of these. There's at least 2 more very close to being completed, which I'll share in due course. In the meantime, take care everyone and keep producing the art.